black. A silence only deep space could hold. Cold light from a dying star bled across the edges of the Jutari scout ship, painting its hull in shades of burnt copper and ash. Inside, it was all function. Hard edges, no comfort. 3 Jutari crew, born in vacuum, raised for this. Bones light, skin a thin gray membrane designed to reflect radiation. No emotion, no waste. They had found it. Object signatures confirmed, the pilot whispered, though the others already knew. The sensor officer didn't blink. They didn't have eyelids. His voice was a dry rasp. Unknown formation 10 clicks from the helix drift. Heat levels. He paused. Elevated. Bleed ratios off scale. Human. The word cracked the air. The commander clicked his fingers once. A command to power down. Passive scan only. Jutari doctrine. Never engage human fleets. Observe. Report. Survive. He had never seen one. Only recordings. Only the aftermath. Scorched planets. Broken moons. No transmissions. Just black boxes with corrupted data. He leaned in toward the sensor display. There was no formation pattern. No hierarchy. It was a swarm. Asymmetrical. Slow. Like drifting junk. Hulls made from dead ships, torn space stations, asteroid fragments fused with reactor cores, but every ship was armed. And they were moving together. "Why aren't they jamming?" the pilot asked. The commander didn't answer. Humans didn't jam. They didn't hide. They didn't need to. He gestured again. "Send probe." A thin metallic dart slipped from the ship, trailing data threads. Silent. Invisible. Seconds passed. Then the lights went out. All lights. The ship didn't shudder. It simply died. No sound. No systems. No air circulation. Inside their suits, breath condensed. Panic was immediate. Visible. Not like humans who locked down when systems failed. Jutari froze. It was not protocol. It was fear. The commander reached for the manual override. Nothing. The system core was gone. Not offline. Gone. No data. No power. Not even static. Something moved on the view screen. A human ship. Closer now. Too close. They hadn't seen it. No lights. No signature. It was blacker than space. Its hull pulsed like it breathed. And across its surface, thousands of marks. White paint, hand-carved symbols, bones. Bones of aliens. Markings of kills. The human ship rotated, exposing its underbelly. Something opened. A slow, yawning iris of metal. The Jutari didn't run. They didn't scream. There was nowhere to go. And then the sound came. Low. Deep. Not mechanical, not natural. A sound like iron being scraped across a frozen lake. It echoed through nothing. Through systems that weren't even online. It wasn't a weapon. It was a message. It was a warning. The commander understood it too late. Human ships weren't built to be elegant, or fast, or clean. They were built from memory, from vengeance, from loss. That's what powered them. The Jutari scout ship began to fracture, not from outside, from inside, heat. Systems bleeding into one another, gravity folding in wrong directions. Time stretched, compressed. Just before the commander's helmet cracked, he saw one last thing. A figure standing on the hull of the human vessel. No suit, no armor, just flesh, frostbitten and raw, eyes glowing like furnace embers. Watching. He didn't wave, didn't speak. He just watched as the Jutari were unmade. And somewhere in the deep dark, another fleet began to move. Human, relentless, silent. The council chamber sat buried beneath 20 kilometers of ice, on the third moon of Vex Cole. No windows, no sound from outside. Just sterile light, rows of black stone seats, and the cold. They met in circles. Always circles. No hierarchy. No comfort. Vor Talon, speaker for the Krith Dominion, stood with hands folded behind his back. His skin shimmered with a faint wetness, a byproduct of the Krith respiratory membrane. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm and clinical. "Repeat the transmission." The technician obeyed. There was no audio, only telemetry. A Jutari scout vessel entering System 9AO under stealth protocol. Then silence. 31 seconds later, system blank. No distress call, no signature decay, no debris, no beacon. Just gone. Vor didn't blink. Krith physiology lacked eyelids. "Any trace?" he asked. "None," said the Tarkin delegate, its voice filtered through a metallic collar that helped vocalize its thoughts. "We dispatched 2 beacons." Both returned garbled noise, spectrum corruption, radiation spikes. Then nothing. A low murmur rippled around the chamber. It was the sound of fear, dressed in the robes of bureaucracy, hidden beneath layers of protocol. One delegate spoke what the rest thought. "Humans." The word struck like a pulse. There was no evidence, no sightings. But it didn't matter. It never did. When things vanished without warning, systems, colonies, fleets, the galaxy knew. Humans didn't conquer like others. They didn't spread. They didn't colonize in spirals of influence. They moved in shadows, hit like thunder, then disappeared again. And when they acted, there was never a warning. Just aftermath. Vor finally turned. His voice was dry, measured. "How far is System 9AO from established Krith borders?" 17 light cycles, said the technician. Unprotected. Low priority. Vor nodded. He already knew what was coming. The council would stall. They would form committees, open investigations, call for probes, assign sub-councils. It always played out the same. Words in place of action. Silence instead of steel. He stepped down from the platform. "I request audience in private," he said. "No private audiences during crisis review," barked a thin, veined creature from the Lekth Alliance. "Council transparency must be—" Vor didn't stop walking. The doors hissed open before him. The council continued debating long after he was gone. No decision would be made. Not one that mattered. 12 hours later, in a chamber below even the council vaults, Vor met with one of the few beings in the galaxy who had faced the humans and lived. His name was Commander Threx, once of the Boer Coalition, now disavowed. No military, no command. Just silence. He sat in the dark. Not by choice. He simply never turned on the lights. Not anymore. Vor stood at the threshold. "I brought the data." Threx said nothing. Vor approached, placing the slate onto the table. The display flickered with proximity. Scout ship, System 9AO, signal loss, unreadable spectrum distortion. "It's the same," Vor said quietly. Threx didn't move. His voice was hollow, scarred. "You didn't call me here for confirmation." "No. You called me here to ask if there's anything we can do." Vor didn't speak. He didn't need to. Threx exhaled slowly. "Then I'll tell you what I told the others. The humans don't fight wars." A pause. Cold, heavy silence. "They end them." Vor stiffened. This was a scout vessel. They didn't engage. Threx turned then. His face was lined with faded burns. Half his jaw had been replaced with artificial bone. One eye, dead and black. "That's the point." He stood. Not tall, not broad, just solid, like stone that refused to erode. "They knew it was there," he said. "They let it come close. They waited, and then they erased it. Not out of fear, not even for strategy." He looked straight through Vor. "They did it because they wanted to." 17 systems away, inside a sealed bunker beneath the crust of a failed colony, a man stood alone before a map made of moving light. The human fleet. Ghosts in the void. 68 ships, if you could call them that. No standard frames, no matching design. Each one built from the wreckage of what came before. They were not uniform. but they were united. Commander Arlen watched the map without blinking. His eyes were dry, red at the edges. He hadn't slept in 2 days. He didn't need to. Not anymore. Behind him, the hatch opened with a hiss. Lieutenant Reese entered, wordless. He placed a single slate on the table beside Arlen. "Jatari Scout," he said. Arlen already knew. "Outcome?" he asked. Reese hesitated. Then, "System collapse?" "No survivors." Arlen nodded once. "Good." There was no celebration, no pride, only silence. "Message from the Black Cell," Reese added. "Phase 2 is greenlit." Arlen didn't look at him. "How long until they move?" he asked. "Council's already splitting." Dominion's pulling forces inward, borders collapsing under fear alone. He finally turned, his voice low and flat. "Then we keep pressure on the dark." Reese nodded and stepped back into the shadows. Arlen stared again at the fleet. It wasn't just a formation. It was a graveyard, orbiting a single will. These ships weren't named. They had no banners, no declarations of allegiance, only numbers etched into hulls. Numbers of the dead, coordinates of lost cities, burned continents, starved colonies. They didn't forget. Humanity had been scattered, broken, left to rot in border systems. But they endured. And now, they were coming back. Not for justice, not for diplomacy, for silence, for vengeance, for the kind of memory that never heals. Somewhere in deep space, beyond mapped systems, a relay station blinked once. It was meant to forward traffic across long dead lines. It had long been abandoned by the councils, but it wasn't empty. Inside, the walls were lined with cables made of human bone. Skin wrapped around insulation like ritual. And in the center, a single being stood. Human. No name, no rank, no eyes, just scarred sockets. He leaned toward the mic. "Signal test. Confirm node breach static." Then a voice replied. "Confirmed. Phase 2 in motion. Next relay?" The eyeless man grinned. "Krith core. We burn it first in the Vexcol chamber. Vor received a second report. Another system dark. No radiation trail. No escape pods. No debris. Just silence." He stood motionless as a lesser aide whispered figures. Population, military presence, resources, all gone. He dismissed the aide with a wave. His fingers trembled, just slightly. Outside the council, riots had begun. Not protests, riots. Species that had once mocked humans were now sealing borders, abandoning outposts, cutting communication lines. Panic spread like sickness. And still, not a single demand from the humans. No message, no broadcast. Just absence. This wasn't war. This was reclamation. He pressed a code into his slate. A line only a handful knew existed. It connected him to Earth, what was left of it. Static hummed, followed by a voice, male, calm, human. "Ready." Vor's throat tightened. He said the only thing that mattered. "Why now?" The voice didn't pause. "Because you forgot what we are." They called it the Black Line. Not a ship, not a place. An understanding. When humanity lost Earth, they didn't cry. When colonies starved, no prayers were said. There was no mourning, no candlelight, just names etched into steel, coordinates marked in blood, engines lit from rage. And from that came the fleet, not led by flags or nations, not even commanders, only belief. Doctrine built on memory, written in oxygen-starved breath and the cold silence of ruined homes. Inside the vessel, Hunter 9, the walls were blackened steel, scratched and burned. No polish, no artificial light, just red strips of emergency glow guiding the crew like veins. Humidity clung to skin. The recycled air tasted of iron and dust. Commander Arlen stood at the core table. No holograms, no projections, just hard wire connections, flickering readouts, and a heat map of the Krith defense network, still pulsing with life. Not for long. Drop confirmed. 38 minutes to target space, came a voice behind him. Reese again. Tactical lead, sharp, cold, loyal. Arlen didn't turn. Krith node? 3 orbital stations, 24 frigates, 1 command carrier, automated defenses, AI linked time to blackout. 20 seconds after breach, no comms, no escape, no survivors. That was the plan. Every system, every time. Arlen stepped back from the table and crossed the command deck. No crew saluted. No one even looked up. Respect wasn't shown here. It was earned. He passed the Hall of Names. A narrow corridor between bulkheads. No lights, just etched plates, 6 inches by 3, pressed into the wall by hand. Each one a death. Not heroes, not martyrs. Losses. He ran a gloved hand across the plates as he walked. His pace slowed. 17th of March, 1989, Child Unit 12, Starvation, Outpost Red Vein, 22nd of April, 1991, Cargo Ship Thresher, Airlock Sabotage. No survivors. April 7th, 1992. Humanity revoked from Council vote. Earth listed collapsed. He stopped at 1. February 1st, 1994. Ryan Arlen executed. Failure to cooperate his brother. His blood. They hadn't even used a weapon, just exposed him to vacuum. No screams, just cold. That was how Krith punished the Defiant. Now Krith would learn what defiance really meant. Arlen walked to his quarters. No luxury, no soundproofing. Just steel and silence. A photograph was bolted to the wall. He didn't look at it often, but he didn't remove it either. A planet, half burned, half blue. Earth, as it once was. He sat, pulled the latches on his armor, pulled off gloves, let the chill in. Then he closed his eyes and waited. 37 minutes later, the fleet burned into orbit. No warning, no signals, just presence. To the Krith, it must have felt like gods falling from the dark. Inside Krith Core Node 7, alarms rang in broken harmony. Techs scrambled through black-lit corridors, skin slick with panic. Unregistered mass signatures, appearing inside the grid. That's impossible. Our perimeter is sealed. Nothing should... The power went out. Just like that. No surge, no flare, just absence. And in the dark, something moved. Boots, metal on stone, slow, heavy. The doors to the command center exploded inward, not from an external blast, but from within the wall itself. The first human stepped through, not armored like Krith soldiers. No light armor, no color, just matte black. Pitted, scratched, fused to the skin like it had grown there. He didn't fire. He looked at the nearest Krith, and the Krith shot first. 3 rounds, pulsed plasma. Each one struck. The human didn't fall, didn't flinch. He walked through it, smoke curling from his chest. Then he raised his weapon, short barrel, rotary core. It screamed once, just once. And then the Krith commander was gone. Not killed, erased. A red smear against the ceiling. The other humans followed, like shadows pulled from broken light. No voices, no chatter, only breath. Within 8 minutes, Node 7 fell. Not a single human dead. In the wreckage of the Krith command deck, Arlen stood over the shattered data core. He wasn't here to collect information. He was here to burn it. Broadcast live feed, he said. Reese tapped 2 keys. A single pulse went out. Council systems received it. It showed Node 7. Burned. Red. Scorched. And Arlen standing in the middle, blood on his armor. He said nothing, just stared into the lens, and then he cut the signal. Across the galaxy, panic tore through the high seats of the council. Delegates abandoned posts. Retreat codes were activated. Refugee fleets were denied entry. On Lekth Prime, a general strangled his own ambassador in the middle of a press chamber, screaming, "You brought this! You did this in the Krith Dominion. Capital worlds cut power to outer colonies to preserve core systems. Even their gods were silent, because they remembered. 100 years ago, they starved Earth. They called humans unfit. They dropped sanctions like bombs. And when Earth broke, they watched. Took what was left, studied it, dismantled it, but they didn't kill it. And now that mistake was coming home. Inside Hunter 9, Arlen sat alone, his armor off, his hands red to the wrist. He stared at the bulkhead, not in thought, not in grief, just in memory. Every world they destroyed was a name removed from the wall. Every station burned was a body avenged. And they weren't even close to done. Outside the fleet, Krith carrier remnants floated like shattered teeth. Flames danced silently in the vacuum. Escape pods had been disabled before launch. Life support vented. No mercy, no survivors. On the edge of the battlefield, a relay beacon blinked once. Inside it, a child, no more than 9, bare skin, scarred scalp, human. She wasn't speaking. She was listening, to a voice only she could hear. "Wait here," it whispered. "Watch. Learn." The child nodded, and in her hand, a blade. Back on Vexcol, Vor Talon locked himself in his office. He watched the live feed again, paused on the human commander's face. Not rage, not glee, just stillness. The stillness of a grave. A report blinked on his desk. 12 more systems dark. No answers, no trace. He stared for a long time, and then wrote a single word on his slate. Extinction? The AI refused to process it. Too late. He used to believe they would listen. Admiral Theron of the Lekth Ascendancy stood alone on the edge of the command platform, his spindled hands pressed behind his back, watching the void beyond the shield glass. The stars did not move. The fleet did not move. But the silence was growing louder. "Transmission?" he asked. His voice cracked, not from age, but from the weight of shame. "Yes, Admiral," came the soft reply. The Lekth officer behind him, small, hunched, still too young to know the guilt Theron carried, handed him the pad. 12 more systems. Human fleet contact. All dark. No survivors. He stared at the last one. Rane 4, agricultural world, unarmed. 17,000 civilians. Burned in minutes. No defenses, no reason. Except one. History. Theron turned to the comms platform. His decision had already been made before he entered the chamber. "Open direct line to the Black Fleet." The technicians hesitated. "Sir, they have no known diplomatic channel." "Open it anyway." After a moment, static filled the bridge. Nothing else. He stepped forward, back straight. Claws locked behind his back. His voice dropped into the core of his chest. "This is Admiral Theron of the Lekth Ascendancy. I am speaking not as a commander, but as one who remembers." He swallowed. "In the years of Earth's decline, I voted. I authorized trade blockades. I approved the embargo on fusion cores. The words stuck, not from fear, but because they felt heavier now than any weight he'd carried in war. I believed we were securing peace, but we were feeding it death. You starved." We looked away. He paused, breathing slow. "I say this now. The Lekth Ascendancy surrenders, unconditionally still silence." He stepped closer to the mic. "We will dismantle our fleets. We will open our systems. We will disarm every orbital line. We ask only that you spare our civilians. Leave our children their sky." His claws shook. Then the static changed. Not a voice, a pulse, low, deep, final. Then the screen lit, and Admiral Theron saw his own face staring back at him, old, thin, hunched. Behind it, the face of Commander Arlen. No sound, just his image, still, watching. Then it faded, and the stars turned black. On Hunter 9, Reese lowered the feed. "Transmission logged," he said. Arlen didn't move. "Orders?" Reese asked. The answer came like a sigh from a wound that never healed. Proceed. No hesitation. Not even a flicker of doubt. Humanity didn't come back for negotiations. They came back to clean the graveyard. The first of the Lekth colonies burned before warning could spread. No orbital strikes, no messy sieges, just entry and silence. Dropships fell like falling teeth, breaching the upper stratosphere with no sonic signature. By the time Lekth Ground Command activated planetary shields, the systems were already compromised, their cores overheating from within, fed back by infected satellites the humans had planted months ago. Theron received the report as he stood before the Council of Nine. He read it once, then removed his badge, let it fall, and walked out. The Lekth had always believed in precision, in logic, but logic didn't survive grief. From the darkness of deep space, Reaper-class ships emerged, taller than city towers, no markings, no propulsion trails, just slabs of reinforced alloy fused together from the ruins of Terra's broken orbit. They didn't fire weapons. They dropped silence. Satellites went dead. Orbiting stations failed. Lekth scientists reported neural bleed across every communication channel. It wasn't jamming, it was corruption. A virus not for machines, but for thought. Lekth language began to fracture. Syntax failed. Orders became impossible to issue. Entire colonies fell into verbal collapse. They couldn't even scream. Inside one such station, Commander Arlen stepped through a ruptured airlock. His boots echoed in a hallway filled with twitching Lekth. Not dead, not injured, just broken. A female cradled her own arm like it was a child. A technician was trying to breathe through their ears. One stood against the wall, repeating a word that no longer meant anything. Arlen walked past them all. No orders to shoot. They weren't threats anymore. They were echoes. He reached the data vault. This time he didn't burn it. He uploaded something instead. A packet. It contained images of Earth's final days, of cities drowned not in water but in silence, of children born in mining shafts who never saw a sky, of ration lines that turned into riots, of hospitals turned morgues, of satellites that watched it all, owned by councils that turned their heads away. The last image? A human mother holding her dead son in a burned shelter, staring straight into the lens. It was marked, "You voted for this." Then the data released. Every Lekth station, world, ship, every screen lit with the truth, and the fleet moved on. In the council bunker on Vex Cole, Vor Talon finally broke protocol. He stood before the assembled remnants, fewer now, seats empty, lights dimmed. His voice was raw, unfiltered. "We sent analysts to monitor them. We tried to intercept transmissions, but they have no central command, no government, no doctrine." He paced. "They operate on memory." He paused at the center of the chamber. "They operate on pain." Somewhere, a Lekth delegate whispered, "They're not human anymore." Vor turned sharply. "No, they're more human than we are." He tapped his slate. A feed from a scout drone flickered to life. A human child, maybe 10, sitting inside a Reaper ship, holding a weapon half her size, eyes like stone. No fear, just waiting. Commander Arlen watched from the command deck of the lead vessel. Systems scrolled data he didn't need to read. Names, dates, every world they'd touched, every scar left in the wake of the council. He stared at the next target. Kelros 3, known for the forced sterilization of human refugees during the supply wars. "Status?" he asked. "Shields holding. Fleet in orbit. Civilian evacuation in progress." He blinked once. Abort escape. Reese didn't ask why. They dropped into the atmosphere like hammers. Kelros 3's upper dome shattered first, its defense grid compromised not by force, but by history. Human saboteurs had been planted in their network cycles ago. Sleeper cells, forgotten agents. They'd waited. Decades. Until the signal came. Now, their work bloomed. Inside the core facility, Lekth children were being loaded into transports. One girl, blue-eyed, trembling, stared as the humans entered. But they didn't shoot. They didn't scream. They simply opened the airlocks, not to let anyone in, but to let everything out. Air, heat, light, gone. In seconds, silence reigned, and in that silence, the last Lekth elder whispered a prayer to a god that never existed. Back in orbit, Arlen watched the thermal map collapse. Reese stood beside him. "Mission complete. Too fast," Arlen muttered. "We'll find another." Arlen stared through the viewport. He didn't hate them. Not anymore. Hate was loud. This was quieter, colder, more final. Reese turned to him. "We still haven't received a single retaliation." "They won't," Arlen said. "Why not?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they know what we're willing to lose." Far across the void, another council chamber fell into darkness. An explosion tore through its roof, vaporizing 3 delegates mid-sentence. No fleet nearby, no missile, just a signal, carried for 10 years through subspace, set to detonate once humanity crossed the 100-system threshold. Now they had. And every failsafe the galaxy trusted had already been turned against them, by ghosts, by the forgotten, by the very species they once dismissed as primitive. Karen used to be a commander. Now he was just a runner. The ship he'd stolen wasn't military grade. Stripped comms, half-functional engine core, no weapons, just an old medical transport that hadn't seen orbit in 5 cycles. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore except distance. He kept his course away from the core systems, away from Vex Cole, away from the ruins, just into the dark, past the edges of mapped space, into the zones where old probes vanished and Navigation A I refused to guess. The kind of silence even Data feared. He'd seen it, not on a feed, not a second-hand report. He'd been there. Ron 4, agriculture colony, population 17,000. He was assigned as off-world monitor, observing harvest quotas, pushing resource compliance, making sure human workers didn't speak out of turn. He remembered how easy it had been. Simple reports, deny requests, cut allocations, let the humans dig, let the dust bury them. One more cycle, just numbers. And then the sky split. No warning, just clouds parting like fabric pulled tight, and a shadow that swallowed the sun. No broadcasts, no demands. The first thing to go was sound. He remembered that more than anything, standing on the outpost balcony, watching the children below playing in irrigation ditches. Then, stillness. The air itself stopped moving. He'd called the control tower. No reply. The backup system pinged for less than 2 seconds before burning out. Just static. A hiss. And then the light faded. No attack. No flame. Just darkness, folding over the colony like an avalanche made of nothing. When Karen ran, he didn't think. He just moved. Downstairs. Past frozen bodies still standing. A tech with her hands clutched to her mouth. A security officer halfway through drawing his weapon. None of them moved. None of them fell. They were frozen inside themselves. That was what scared him most. Not death. But that pause. He'd made it to the landing pad. His pilot was gone. Literally gone. Not dead. Not wounded. Just missing. His helmet sat in the seat. Full oxygen. Karen didn't care. He'd launched the ship with override keys. Took a hard burn out of orbit. Never looked back. That was 2 days ago. He hadn't slept. Now, drifting beyond known sectors, he kept one eye on the fuel levels, one on the dark ahead. The stars were changing. They weren't where they were supposed to be. He tapped the console again. No nav. The galactic map was failing. Or being erased. Bit by bit, not by error, by choice. He opened the external cam. Just black. Nothing but the stars. Then, one blinked. Just for a second. Not a star. A shape. He leaned closer. Something moved across the glass. No sound, no impact. Just a shadow. He activated the scan. No results. Then, finally, a signal. Short. Compressed. Human code. Just 4 words. You were there. His breath caught. He killed the feed, but the words remained on the screen, burned in red. He didn't reply. There was no point. They already knew where he was. Back in the deep sectors of human space, Commander Arlen stood aboard the bridge of Hunter 9, arms folded, watching the afterburn of another system blink out. "Contact?" Reese asked. Arlen didn't blink. "Civilian." "Response?" "Tracking only." Reese didn't ask questions anymore. Karen's ship was a speck on the edge of reach, not worth resources, but worth watching. Some targets needed to feel the time pass. Arlen moved away from the viewport and entered the dark chamber at the rear of the deck. No lights, just walls lined with names. Again, not plaques, but faces, digital fragments, photographs recovered from ancient Earth servers, faded, blurred. Every time a system burned, one more image was added, and below it, a word, witnessed. He paused before one. A man in a Lekth officer's coat, holding a glass of red fluid, smiling. Karen. He had been posted at Rane 4. He had filed the denial to increase food output. He had cut water rations for human units during dry season. His file was complete. The only thing missing now was the ending. Karen didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time his eyelids dipped, he saw the children in the dust, the way their heads had tilted when the sound stopped. Not fast, not terrified, just confused. He'd been there. He'd lived. But part of him knew he wasn't supposed to. That's what this was. Not war. Not even justice. This was correction. The universe was aligning itself. And he was the glitch. He began dumping memory cores, logs, notes, messages, all into space. Anything that could tie him to Rane 4. Anyone! His hands shook as he erased his own birth data. His name, his rank. All gone. But it wouldn't matter. They weren't hunting names. They were hunting memory. Somewhere in the void, a child sat inside a sealed human vessel, watching a screen. Karen's face was there. She was no older than 8. Skin pale from void exposure. Eyes like broken glass. She didn't smile. She tapped a code. Witness confirmed. She didn't need to ask permission. The command had already been sent. Karen's engines died exactly 7 hours later. No warning, just a blink. Then silence. The lights stayed on, the air held, but the ship was dead. He tried the manual system. Nothing. Tried to reboot. Nothing. And then the view outside began to change. No movement, just the stars themselves. Folding. He moved to the glass. A shape hovered ahead. It wasn't a ship, not really. Just a wall of dark metal and bone, with human symbols carved deep into its skin, a grave that flew. And behind the glass, one figure. No suit, no weapons, just eyes, red, still, familiar. Karen's throat locked. "Please," he whispered. His voice cracked under its own weight. He hadn't spoken in days. He backed away from the window. The lights flickered once. Then his ship opened. No explosion. No fire. Just absence and a breath of cold. He tried to scream, but the air was already gone. Inside Hunter 9, Reese confirmed the final packet. "Target confirmed. Witness resolved." Arlen stood by the names. Karen's image faded from the wall. He said nothing. Just walked back to the deck. Another system was ahead, another place they had forgotten. But the fleet remembered. Always. Vortalin could barely breathe. The pressure in the lower council bunker was suffocating, not from oxygen loss, the system still functioned, but from something deeper. From truth. 2 more delegates had killed themselves in the last cycle. One had opened the roof dome manually, letting the black vacuum take him as the stars turned red. The other had walked into a purifier core and smiled before the flames swallowed him. The remaining 8 had stopped speaking to one another. There were no more votes. Only waiting. Waiting for their names to show up next. Vor still tried to function. Still sent out signals, reports, pleas, but none were answered. Not even by their own systems. He stood now before the main screen in the Krith control vault. Behind him, aides whispered emergency protocols, compiled refugee data, tried to process what burned really meant. But he wasn't listening. He was watching a live feed from Delos 4, once a trade hub of the outer sectors. The image was frozen now, mid-broadcast, a man. Human. Standing in the middle of the crater that had once been the Delos capital. No armor, no weapons, just a coat, burned at the seams. His hair was gone, his skin cracked. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look on his face wasn't rage. It was memory. And behind him, the flag of the Delos Parliament, split in half, melted, nailed to the side of a building that no longer had doors. The feed hadn't ended because the network cut out. It had ended because the camera operator disappeared. In the high orbit above the Vex Coal core, a fleet of defenders stood idle. Krith, Lekth, Tarkin, Bor, once enemies, now allies, but only in fear. None of their ships moved. They didn't have to, because something else was coming. Not fast, not loud, just inevitable. Commander Arlen stood aboard Hunter 9, the lead ship now guiding the final arc towards the core territories. He had not changed uniform in weeks. The grime on his gloves was from blood that had dried 2 systems ago. The hollow in his chest was from a place no medicine touched. But he stood straight, calm, in control. Beside him, Reese updated the map. Krith core system is in range. They're stalling evacuation ships, power failing, orbital grid is active but degraded. Arlen nodded. Any message? 3. All diplomatic. Full surrender. Arlen didn't blink. Response? None, Reese said. Arlen walked toward the outer chamber. The place with no lights. The place with names. He passed rows of steel plates. Names, dates, coordinates. Each one was a reminder of what they were. Not soldiers, not monsters. Just a species remembering. Back inside the Krith capital vault, Vor's hands trembled as he activated the emergency channel. One last chance. A frequency that had not been used in 100 years. It had no encryption. Just one line. To the ones who remember, to those who survived, we kneel. He sent it, and waited. A minute passed. Then 5. Then the screen flickered. No sound. Just a single message, scrolling in red. A memory does not forgive. Vor collapsed. Not out of pain, but from understanding. The human fleet didn't slow. They moved like ghosts through the Krith outer rings, systems failing before the first shots fired. Entire power grids shorted without a pulse weapon launched. Civilian transports lost course. Automated defenses rotated blindly, searching for targets that no longer had heat signatures. Humanity had learned. Not just how to fight, but how to erase. They didn't leave debris anymore. Just quiet. On the 10th day, the first of the Council planets fell. Not by war, by surrender. Voluntary. The planet Morsith, once the military anchor of the Tarkin Alliance, sent a broadcast to all frequencies. We will not fight you. We will not flee you, but we will no longer deny you. Then every member of their planetary leadership walked into the atmosphere without suits, and let the sky take them. In the aftermath, something changed. Not in the human fleet, but in the stars. Whole sectors began to go dark, not destroyed, abandoned. Stations self-evacuated. Borders were left open. Laws stopped being enforced. No one wanted to govern anymore, because there was nothing left to govern. Only the approaching truth. Inside Hunter 9, Reese leaned close to the command board. He noticed something strange. "Sir," he said, voice low. Arlen turned. Reese pointed at the map. "Sectors are going dark before we get there. Civilian AI shutting down, auto systems terminating, civilizations self-erasing." Arlen stared. "Why?" Reese answered without emotion. "Because they think we'll burn it anyway." Arlen nodded once. They're not wrong. But he felt something else. Not satisfaction. Not even vindication. Just wait. He returned to the name wall, stopped at one entry. Earth, total designation null, revoked by Council, cycle 87.12, and beneath it, a new line was blinking. Reclamation. In process. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It never had been. They didn't want apologies. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted truth to live longer than the silence. Back on Vexcol, Vor finally made his choice. He walked alone to the planetary comms relay. No guards, no aides, just him. He entered the access code, activated the central dish, and opened all frequencies. Then he spoke. Not as a council member, not as a leader, just as a being who had lived long enough to regret everything. To those who walk in the dark, to those who never stopped remembering, you are not monsters. You are not ghosts. You are what we made, and for that we open the way. The council is gone. The silence is yours now. He deactivated the system. Then he sat in the snow, waiting. When the sky darkened, he didn't flinch. Above the planet, Hunter 9 dropped from orbit. No weapons fired, no shuttles deployed, just one pod. It fell slow, and when it landed in the ash fields outside the relay tower, a figure stepped out. Arlen. Alone. Vor stood as the wind picked up. They said nothing. Two species, two survivors, two sides of a lie finally ended. Then Arlen walked past him, into the building, and Vor lowered his head. Not in shame, in acceptance. That night, for the first time in a century, the stars over Vexcol didn't flicker. They stared back. And the universe knew. Humanity was no longer asking. The stars above Vexcol were different now, not because they had moved, but because something had changed behind them. On the command deck of Hunter 9, Arlen watched the void like it was an old enemy. The fleet held position across the rim of the core systems, silent, waiting, not for resistance. There was none left, but for something deeper. Behind him, Reese leaned over the console. His voice was low. "It's time." Arlen didn't respond at first. His fingers brushed the inside of his collar. There, tucked behind the armor plate, a rusted tag, half-etched, burned at the edges, a name once wiped from the records. Earth. "Coordinates confirmed," Reese said. "We're locked." Arlen turned, nodding once. "Bring her home." Across the fleet, commands spread like a breath held too long, engines lit without heat, hull plates sealed with names, no alarms, no countdown, no cheers, just motion. They moved through old drift corridors, through nebula clouds thick with ash, through the broken roots of long-dead colonies, and then the system. It didn't appear like other systems. Not bright, not radiant, just a pale, flickering star at its heart, tired, forgotten, and orbiting it, the planet, still whole, but not alive. Earth. Long ago they buried it, not with bombs or fire, but with shame. The Council had declared it voided. No travel, no recognition, no mention. Any AI carrying its coordinates was wiped. Any record bearing its name, destroyed. The humans who fled it never looked back. Not because they didn't want to, but because they weren't allowed to. The fleet hadn't been to Earth in over a century, but it had never left them. Every mission, every nameplate, every burned system, all of it led here. Now, Arlen stood again before the world that birthed him, or what was left of it. Reese stood beside him. He said nothing at first. Then, softly, atmospheres decayed. No clean air, radiation storms around both poles, cities buried. Arlen stared at the surface. He could still trace the coastlines, still see the broken arc of what used to be the Atlantic. "It's still there," Arlen said. Reese glanced at him. "What is?" Arlen's voice was steady. "The reason." When they dropped into the lower orbit, the world didn't resist. There were no old defense systems, no corrupted satellites, only silence and shadow. They landed in what had once been the eastern seaboard, coordinates pulled from ancient memory cores. Old cities, now buried under collapse and time. Arlen stepped onto the soil. It crunched under his boots, not snow, not ash, just memory, turned to dust. He walked through the ruins of buildings that no longer had names, past husks of transit systems, ruined towers half consumed by ivy and frost. And then he stopped before a single metal sign, half buried. He knelt, brushing the surface with gloved hands. Beneath layers of time, letters emerged. Washington, D.C. Reese stood behind him. Silent. No salute, no speech, just presence. Elsewhere across the planet, drop teams spread. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to recover. They moved like ghosts through old human cities, scanning for signals, for remains, for history. In what had once been Tokyo, they found a vault beneath an underwater lab, still sealed, still intact. Inside, books, paper, photographs, a girl in a hospital bed holding a star chart. Her file read, Subject, Mira Cyto Condition, Terminal Radiation Exposure. Last words recorded, I hope they don't forget us. In the frozen deserts of what had been Africa, another team uncovered an archive dome, buried under collapse. Its servers long dead, but etched into the walls, a map. Every human settlement, every refugee route, each one connected to Earth by a single phrase, repeated over and over in 100 languages. Home is not a place. It's who remembers you, and then the core vault was found, beneath the ruins of Geneva. Arlen was the first to enter. The doors groaned open after 134 years of darkness. Inside, silence, dust, and a single active console, powered by decay cells meant to last 500 years. He approached it, wiped the screen. A line blinked. Are you ready to restore? He pressed. Yes. The system pulsed once. Then names began to appear. Cities, nations, languages, species records, cultural archives, lost colonies, families, victims, and finally, Earth. The word glowed white against black, unerased. The transmission went out, encrypted, silent, unstoppable. Not a broadcast, a correction. Across the galaxy, databases cracked open, hardwired locks failed, and Earth's name returned to every registry, every map, every comms index. Some tried to stop it. Their systems imploded. Some tried to hide it. Their satellites shut down. In the space of a single minute, Earth was back. Not as a location, as a memory that refused to stay buried. Back aboard Hunter 9, Reese confirmed it. Every council system now recognizes Earth. Arlen nodded. And the fleet? They're waiting. He turned to the deck crew. All of them? Reese gave the ghost of a smile. Even the old ones. The ones we left behind, Arlen exhaled. All right. He turned to the comms unit. Open the dark channel. The technician blinked. You mean, yes. For the first time in a century, the black signal was reactivated. No encryption, no voice, just coordinates. Earth. Out beyond the rim, In broken sectors filled with rusted ships and forgotten war orphans, old vessels stirred. Ships that hadn't moved in decades. Engines reignited. Lights returned. Silent crews. Humans thought lost to time, received the signal. And without a word, they turned home. Inside one such ship, a man with frost on his beard stared at the blinking light on his console. He reached out, tapped it once, then whispered, "Finally." Arlen stood on the surface one last time before launch, looking at the horizon. The wind was thin, but it was still wind. He knelt, digging into the earth with bare hands until his fingers hit stone. There, he placed the tag, the one he'd carried for years, and spoke the only words he had left. "We brought them back." Then he rose, turned, and walked into the light of the ship's belly. The engines fired, and the fleet rose into orbit, but this time it didn't move to destroy. It moved to protect. Earth was no longer a ghost. It was a beacon. From orbit, Earth didn't look like salvation. It looked like a scar that never healed. The seas were pale. Clouds barely formed. Pockets of green still flickered in cracks across the continents, but most of the surface was rust and ash. The old blue was there, but only faint, like a bruise under skin. Arlen watched it from the viewport of Hunter 9. He didn't speak. No one did any more unless it was necessary. The fleet hovered in a broken ring around the planet, not as a wall, not as a threat, as a vow that no one would ever erase it again, not with force, not with law, not with silence. Earth was back, but the question still burned. Was there anything left to come home to? Across the galaxy, signals flickered. The reactivation of Earth in the archives had rippled like a shockwave. In some corners, they burned it from their databases again. In others, they mourned it. Some called it prophecy fulfilled. Others called it a curse returning. But no one ignored it. Because you can't ignore a wound that never closed. Inside the central vault on Earth, Arlen walked alone. This place had once been the data core for the United Nations, buried beneath the Swiss mountains. The walls were cracked now. Roots pushed through old steel. The floor was flooded knee-deep with stagnant water, and the light came from bioreactive vines along the ceiling. But the servers were still here, or pieces of them. He stepped through the rubble to the core terminal. Reese was behind him, quiet. A technician had spent the last 3 days rebuilding the interface, not from memory, but from fragments etched into forgotten devices. And now the terminal pulsed with low blue light. "Try it," Arlen said. Reese keyed the command. A line of code scrolled across the interface, ancient encryption, then a prompt, UN archive restoration. Status, suspended reason primary node lost. Override? Y in. Arlen stepped forward. Pressed. Y. A moment passed. Then the screen lit up. Logs began to flood the room. Video, audio, text. 2023, ecological collapse worsens. 2025, Mars colonies officially fail. 2029, the final drought begins. 2031, global governance revoked by vote. 2037, United Council enacts isolation protocols. 2041, human access to food supply suspended. 2042, Earth removed from galactic register. Arlen watched them scroll, line by line, not because he didn't remember, but because he needed to see it said aloud, that it was real, that they were right to come back. And then the final line came. One no one had ever seen before. A message buried in the last log. Not from a soldier, not from a leader. From a maintenance worker buried in a subroutine of the last earthbound server. They're going to forget us. Don't let them. The signature was a child's name. Mira Saito. In the command hall above the vault, the highest-ranking human captains gathered. Most didn't wear rank anymore. Their armor was mismatched, their faces hidden behind helmets or scars or time. But they stood together. Arlen entered and nodded once. That was all they needed. They all knew what came next. No declarations, no new flags, no demands. The galaxy had already been changed. The systems had been burned. The memory had been restored. There was only one thing left to do, and no one wanted to say it out loud. So Arlen did. "We stay." One of the captains, an old man with a breathing mask and no visible insignia, stepped forward. "And what of the others?" Arlen turned to him. "They'll follow their paths. Some will scatter, some will rebuild, some will wait. And us? We guard." A silence settled. Not fear, not reluctance, just the weight of permanence. Another captain, a woman with a prosthetic arm fused from 3 generations of battlefield salvage, stepped forward. "Guard what? There's no population, no network, no defense grid." Arlen looked up through the vaulted window toward the dead sky and said what none of them wanted to admit. "We guard the memory." The reclamation protocols were activated. Ships broke formation and fell to the surface. But they didn't carry weapons. They carried seeds. In vaults, long buried inside cryo-sleep decks and gene banks, lay the DNA of every species that once touched Earth. Not all survived. But enough did. The forests would grow again. Not fast, not bright, but slow and quietly. Above, the outer rim patrols watched the galactic fringe. Many systems didn't approach. Some sent emissaries. Arlen never answered them, because there was nothing left to say. Not after the galaxy allowed them to starve. Not after Earth had been forgotten. Now, humanity spoke in silence, and silence said enough. Back in the data core, Reese sat beside the terminal. The logs were still playing. He found one, deep in the archives. A video file. Time-stamped, February 9th, 2042. Title, Last Day at the Shelter. He opened it. The screen flickered. A human child sat in a metal hallway. No shoes, holding a stuffed animal. Behind her, smoke. Screaming. But she didn't cry. She whispered something, almost to herself. "We're not gone. We're just waiting." Reese paused it. Arlen stood behind him, watching. He said nothing. In time, the weather began to shift. Rain returned, first thin, then steady. The ground, cracked for a century, breathed in moisture. Roots pushed upward. In a small valley north of the ruins of New York, the first forest took shape. They named it after no one, because names could be erased. But forests, remember. Years passed. The fleet didn't leave. They stayed in orbit, not like a noose, like a vow. Inside the old Earth cities, humans returned. Not just from the fleet, from colonies, from hiding, from exile. Some born in space, some born in chains, but all human. And when they stepped on soil, they didn't cheer. They knelt and pressed their palms to the earth, like they were touching an old friend who'd been asleep too long. Arlen never took off his armor again, even as the air cleared, even as green returned. He stayed in the high tower above the Capitol ruins, now rebuilt with no walls, no flags, just names, carved into the stone, not to honor the dead, to remember the living. The final message he recorded was never sent. It wasn't meant for the galaxy. It was meant for the child in the archive video, the one who said, "We're just waiting." He sat at the console, eyes dim, voice low. "We remembered. We came back. We made them see. But more than that, we lived." He ended the recording. And finally, after all the years, he closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to rest. Because the mission was over, and Earth was awake. Final line, in the dark between stars, where memory sleeps and silence reigns, a single voice remains. It doesn't cry, it doesn't beg, it doesn't rage. It whispers, "We're still here.